One morning in autumn, before the first frost, a boy who lived on a farm was going to school. Do you know what his name was? Well, sometimes his mother called him
Samuel.
Sometimes his father called him Sam. His friends called him Sammy, and that's what we'll call him. Oh my, he forgot his lunch. Sammy had been wondering about the frost and if it would come tonight. Mother thought not, as she felt the warm breeze on her face. Maybe not for another few weeks. And with that, off to school by a shortcut through the cornfield. Some of the corn was already gathered in shocks. The pumpkins had been picked and stacked in piles. But this time there wasn't even one extra big pumpkin. And that wasn't good, especially for a boy who wanted a real big jack-o'-lantern. But what's that? Way off at the edge of the field. It was something orange, and Sammy had to find out if... Golly, a pumpkin on the vine! That means still growing. And it will grow bigger and bigger, till the frost kills the vine. And if the frost doesn't come for 2 weeks, oh boy! If only the frost will wait, then Sammy will have the biggest jack-o'-lantern ever. But Sammy could see signs that the frost was coming soon. If you looked, you could see them too. Off in the woods, a squirrel was gathering nuts. If you looked carefully among the leaves of a bush, you could see a caterpillar getting ready for winter. And it isn't at all unusual to see flocks of birds flying south. Of course, Sammy spent most of his time during the next few weeks in school. As the days passed, the wind blew stronger and colder. But the pumpkin kept growing. The caterpillar had made his cocoon for the coming winter. But on the farm there was work to be done before the frost came. Mother had just finished picking tomatoes. Don't they look good? Father was getting ready to harvest the rest of the corn before the frost came. And how were things with Sammy that October afternoon? His pumpkin had grown bigger, and he was a little eager to carve his jack-o'-lantern. Sammy liked to help put the hay in the barn for the winter. But he wanted to know if the frost would come tonight. Well, Sammy asked Father. Would the answer be no again? Well, and Father thought about it for a while and decided, yes, I think there'll be a hard frost tonight, Sam. Really? Now there's a pumpkin a boy could be proud of. And tomorrow, after the frost, Sammy would pick it for his jack-o'-lantern. Just before the sun set, the family came out to finish the work that had to be done before the frost. Father brought Crybaby the calf into the barn. Crybaby was too young to spend the cold night outdoors. Mother and Sammy picked the last of the ripe vegetables. And Father drove the tractor into the barn so that it would be easier to start the next morning. Then the work was all done. The sun set, the warmth of the day passed, and the cold night came. Sammy pulled up an extra blanket when he went to bed that night. For the first time in many months, the temperature was going to be freezing. And then Sammy fell asleep. And while he slept, the moon was big and bright. Not a cloud was in the sky. Not a tree was moving. The air was cold and still. The next morning, when Sammy woke up, can you guess what was the first thing he saw? It was frost on the window in beautiful patterns and designs. And over the whole farm there was frost. It was a thin coating of ice. Do you know a poem about the frost? When the frost is on the pumpkin and the fodder's in the shock, and you hear the kyuck and gobble of the strutting turkey cock, and the clacking of the guineas and the clucking of the hens, and the rooster's hallelujah as he tiptoes on the fence. Oh, it's then the times a fella is a-feeling at his best, with the rising sun to greet him from a night of peaceful rest. And he leaves the house bareheaded and goes out to feed the stock, when the frost is on the and the fodder's in the shock. By the time Sammy got outdoors, the frost was almost all gone. But it was still quite cool. Now for some exploring to see what the frost had done. The first place he looked was in the flower garden. The zinnias were killed by the frost, but Mother would plant new ones next spring. And look, the iris leaves had all fallen down. Well, the iris would bloom again next year. The marigolds were dead. But the frost hadn't hurt the sweet alyssum at all. And look at the leaves. Soon now they would fall and the trees would be bare. In the vegetable garden, Sammy found that the frost had wilted the cabbage leaves. The parsley was killed. But the pretty green gourd was ready for picking. Picking? That reminded Sammy of something. The pumpkin was fine. The frost had melted, but the vine had wilted, and the pumpkin had grown as big as it would get. So big that Sammy couldn't lift it. So big that Sammy would need some help. And to tell the truth, it was so big that it was even heavy for Father. Do you remember what Sammy was going to do with the pumpkin? Well, he made it into the biggest jack-o'-lantern that he had ever seen.
Wow.
Now that's a story. That's why